Greetings, beautiful earthlings. My name's Jason, and I want to talk to you just a little bit about information and our right, our fundamental right to access the highest quality information available to us at this time. We live in a society that is becoming more and more difficult to access that information that we all deserve to have access to. And this is directly because of disinformation campaigns, which actually have to do with all kinds of injustice regarding highly paid lawyers who lobby on behalf of these criminal conglomerates such as the egg industry, the egg board, which is a part of our government, the meat industry, and the dairy industries. And I'm going to talk a bit about these guys. I'm going to talk about the number 3, 2, and number 1 chronic illnesses. I'm not sure why I went out of order there, and I'm going to talk about the number 1 killer especially. And I think I'm going to talk about, who knows, maybe a little bit of keto, a little bit of COVID, a little bit of the immune system, a little germ theory, terrain theory, and perhaps our right to do whatever the hell we want to do as long as we're not hurting anyone else. Perhaps I'll start there. Imagine if we lived in a world where not only were the warning labels missing from tobacco products, but doctors everywhere were prescribing cigarettes to lose weight and to heal skin issues and other symptoms. Well, that's actually what used to happen. These tobacco industries had the medical industry in the palms of their hands, and believe it or not, the same rulebook that they used back then is being applied today. In fact, not only the same rulebook, but the same company, the same advertising agencies, they changed their name, but it's still the same companies, are still in charge of advertising for the egg industry, including the egg board, which is a part of our government, as well as the meat industry and the dairy industry. Now, it is my right to put anything that I want to in my body, and it's your right to put anything that you want to put in your body, as long as we're not hurting anyone else. And I'm going to tie this into ethical veganism probably, but mostly this video is about nutrition, and not only what's optimal, but our right to know what's optimal. The problem is not that, in my view, it's not that we're necessarily choosing making the wrong choices for ourselves, but it's that we don't know any better. It's that when you really want to know what's optimal and you look it up, guess what? The entire top 3 Google pages are totally full of disinformation, not just misinformation. It's not like Google accidentally put a bunch of bullshit in the feed and you have to sort through it. Google loves us, right? No, this shit is paid for. I'm talking billions and billions of dollars paid for by the egg, meat, and dairy industries. And they want their products in our bodies, and they don't care about medicine. They don't care about what's optimal for human health. So the number 1 killer, let's talk about that, is heart disease. It's actually coronary artery disease. And it's not like we don't know the cause of coronary artery disease. The cause is a diet that is rich in animal protein, which actually is our number 1 source for saturated fat and dietary cholesterol. Now, the number 1 source for dietary cholesterol is eggs, with, believe it or not, chicken, which is our healthy meat supposedly, number 2 for dietary cholesterol. Chicken is awful for your body. You should never ever put the dead body of a chicken into your body, or the chicken period, the egg, into your body. It's not healthy, and it immediately makes your blood thicker and slower so that your body doesn't perfuse properly. And this can be measured in your blood serum within 3 hours of eating anything with a chicken or an egg in it. And this also includes any form of saturated fat. As soon as you eat anything like any kind of dairy product, anything that comes from a cow, if you put it into your body, your blood becomes thicker. We can measure your blood serum, and your artery function is impaired. Not only that, when you do this long term, we get something called I can't say it, arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. And coronary artery disease is where these arteries become hardened, and this is actually really the definition of old age. I know that it has to do with telomeres and other factors too with the immune system, but most people don't die they didn't have enough telomeres left. Most people die because their arteries got too hard around the age of 50 or 60, and they died way too young. And it wasn't an accident. They were literally murdered. I say murdered because the information was intentionally withheld from them with regard to what these products do to our health. Now, every time you eat any kind of dairy product, dairy is the #1 source for saturated fat in the West. Anytime you eat a dairy product, you're eating legal amounts of feces, blood, and pus. Legal amounts of feces, blood, and pus. As soon as you eat dairy products, your arteries are impaired. Your blood becomes thicker. When you eat a dead animal's flesh, when you chop up a dead animal's body, first of all, you're not a refrigerator. The first thing you have to do is you have to freeze that shit. Why? Because as soon as you kill an animal, the decaying process has already begun. So our goal when we want to eat an animal product is we have to suspend that death process, right? So we put it into a freezer. Well, as soon as you decide to thaw that meat is a euphemism. Call it what it is. It's dead, rotting flesh of a corpse that has been chopped up into pieces. And when you put that in your body, when you thaw it, immediately microbes and parasites begin to grow and to multiply, because that's nature. And guess what? As soon as you eat it, because you have that digestive tract that is most closely related to that of a great ape, not a lion, in spite of your massive fangs, you're not a lion. Not to mention, have you ever seen a great ape? They got giant fucking fangs, and guess what? They're vegans. As soon as you eat it, it has to process through 30 feet of digestive tract. You know that a lion has about 9 feet of digestive tract? It's a massive difference. A lion eats a dead animal and it processes very quickly. When a human being eats a dead animal, that shit rots and continues to rot inside the digestive tract, which the digestive tract begins from mouth to anus. And this is the leading cause of colorectal cancer and other types of cancers. I'm not talking about risk factors here. I'm talking about causal link. It's already been established. Just like the cause of the #1 killer is a diet that's full of dietary cholesterol and saturated fat. And we already talked about the #1 sources of saturated fat and dietary cholesterol. Eggs and dairy products, with meat literally next on both of those things. There's no such thing as a healthy meat option, because whatever nutrients you imagine that you're getting from these animal products, you can get from a plant. Protein, you get it from a plant. In fact, no animals make protein. Where do you think the animals get it? All animals in the entire planet get their protein from plants, because animals don't make protein. We don't make protein. Plants make protein. All protein comes from plants or an animal that ate a plant. And if you want to talk about essential amino acids, if you had rice and beans in the same day, you just got all 12. It's literally that easy to get all 12. And there's nothing saying you have to get all 12 in the same day or the same week, but you need them all eventually in order to make protein be healthy. And essential means that your body doesn't make them. You have to get them from a plant. And it's wicked easy to get them. You don't have to eat an animal to get your 12 amino acids. If you eat a variety of plant foods, if you eat the rainbow every day, you're going to get all 12 really, really easily. Now, let's talk about what the essential what the essential diet is for the human machine. This is known as a whole food, plant-based diet with no SOS. SOS means no salt, sugar, or oil. Whole food, plant-based, no salt, sugar, or oil. That is the optimal diet for the human machine. That's what we're aiming at. When you're looking that up online and you want to know what should we be eating, that's the truth. That's at the bottom of the disinformation. When you finally get there, that's the truth that you've been looking for. Whole food, plant-based. Not Sebi, not Dr. Sebi. I could go on and on about the crazy fad diets that exist, and the cults and the weird followings, like the Sebi cult, for example, prescribing a very specific diet, very restrictive diet, so that you can be alkaline. When if you eat a whole food plant-based diet with no SOS, guess what? It's already alkaline. Your body will have a perfect pH. You don't need to add anything. You don't need to add any minerals. Guess what? If you add pink Himalayan sea salt or any other type of salt to your food, you're adding inorganic, dead minerals, which means the body cannot use them, because the body can only use organic minerals, and the only source for organic minerals in this entire world is plants. And the reason for that is because rocks and dirt, minerals and salts, are inorganic in the earth. And the only way they become organic is through the root systems of plants. Plants take in the inorganic minerals because guess what? They can use them. Plants are really excited about inorganic minerals, and they use them and they transmute them through their root system. And then we eat the plants, we eat organic iron, for example. If you try to eat inorganic iron, if you go to the supplement industry and you don't know, and it doesn't say whether or not it's organic or inorganic iron, well, guess what? Did you know that the very first iron supplement was just ground up nails? Iron nails. Look it up. This is what we used to think. We thought, well, we didn't know the difference between inorganic iron and organic iron. And you would think that now we know, right? And now the supplement industry knows the difference. The only minerals that you can be used by the body are organic minerals, and the only source for organic minerals is plants. So if you're drinking mineral water because you want to make sure you got your minerals, guess what? You're drinking minerals that are inorganic. The body cannot use them. So when they go into the body, guess where they go? They get lodged in the periphery, in the joints, causing arthritis. This is why when you drink distilled water in any of the four forms, in sleet, snow, rain, and basically distilled in the clouds. So that's one form. Another form is urine. Our urine is 95% distilled water, with 5% being vitamins, enzymes, and urea. And the third way is eating raw fruits and vegetables. Every time you eat an apple, an orange, a watermelon, you're drinking distilled water. Water has been distilled by the plant. Distilled means not still. So water that's not distilled is still. It's dead, like the Dead Sea. In other words, it's all the water molecules, hydrogen, oxygen, are weighed down by the properties of those minerals, of those elements. And guess what? They're not moving. It's slow water. When you drink distilled water, or reverse osmosis, which is 95% distilled, close enough, what you have is distilled. It's the fastest water you can drink. And when you eat a fruit or a vegetable, you're drinking distilled water. If you research the thousands of books that are on urine therapy, and you come across the claims that are there, it's not because our urine is magical. It's because urine is distilled water, and distilled water flushes out the inorganic minerals in your body. That's why people who get on who have rheumatoid arthritis, who take urine therapy in other words, it's the equivalent of having 1 to 3 gallons of distilled water every single day, and they flush it out and they do urine fasting or any sort of distilled water fasting. Guess what? It cures their arthritis and other there's amazing claims. People who had gray hair got their color back. People who had bald spots started growing hair. All kinds of amazing stories, anecdotal. Take it with a grain of salt. But I'm talking thousands of books, a lot of literature to be distilled, if you will. And that's just one tiny factor. One of the reasons why plants are so healthy for you is because they're full of distilled water. And let's see, inorganic minerals. The number one killer is, just like the top 3 chronic illnesses, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. All 3 of them are foodborne illnesses. And guess what? These industries, the meat, dairy, and egg industry, do not want you to know that their products are causing all 3 top Western chronic illnesses. The amazing thing when you talk about the blue zones, I'm talking about the most healthy groups in the entire planet. The blue zones, when you look at what they eat, blue zone is a group of human beings that do not have any occurrences of those 3 chronic illnesses, and they've been studied. And when you look at what they eat, mostly starchy potato, either sweet potatoes, rice, or corn. We're talking about the healthiest people in the world, all base their diet on a starchy vegetable. This is why Dr. John McDougall says that we're starchivores. This is how Dr. Esselstyn and the other, I forget the other guy's name. This is how arteries, even in the 90s, we've known this for a while, that you can unclog arteries simply by prescribing a whole food plant-based diet. When you get people off the saturated fat, off the dietary cholesterol, and off the plant oils, because we didn't evolve to extract oils from the plants, throw away their fiber and drink the oil. That's not a natural process. The oil is toxic. There's no such thing as a healthy oil. When you get these products out of our bodies, if you have a chronic illness such as heart disease, it's curable. Arteries, as they get smaller and narrower, which is coronary artery disease, they begin to open up. And you can see the pictures. Just look it up. And so this is not a death sentence. If you have the beginning stages of silent heart disease, which most people do, I hope that you're processing the fact that this is the number one killer, that this literally is the most popular way to go out. In other words, if you're not doing something radical to opt out of the status quo, if you're not being a weirdo and falling in love with plants and eating the fucking rainbow every day, then you're going to die of the number one killer. And the number one killer, heart disease, is directly related to the other ones. When you eat processed meat, not only are you clogging your arteries and making your blood thicker, not only are you causing the number one killer, but you're also blocking the insulin receptors, which causes type 2 diabetes. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But not only are you causing type 2 diabetes, but you're causing multiple types of cancers, including colorectal cancer, which is caused by meat rotting inside of our bodies, inside of our digestive tract, inside of our colon and our sigmoid colon. We're not supposed to have rotting, dead animal flesh inside of our digestive tract rotting for a long time. Again, our digestive tract mostly resembles that of a herbivore or a starchivore. We are cultural omnivores. That means we're so smart that we choose to eat something that's terrible for us. But just because we're behavioral omnivores does not mean that that is the optimal diet for the human being. When you look at what it does, and I promise you, if you trade in your shit questions like, is a carb good, is a carb bad, what's better, low fat or high, if you just ask the question, what is the optimal diet for the human machine? Or even better question, what happens when I put this in my body? Ask that question. What happens when I put a processed meat like hamburger, sausage, ham, bologna, salami, pepperoni, when I put those things in my body, which by the way, have been named as a class 1A carcinogen by the World Health Organization since 2012. And Harvard Med has been pushing this information out since then. I'm talking about like on repeat, on repeat. And since then they have absolutely definitively confirmed that all processed meats are causally linked to not only colorectal cancer, but to heart disease, the number one most popular way to go out in this planet, in the West. The blue zones, for example, the Okinawans, they don't have any of the chronic illnesses, and they don't have any processed meat, or they didn't. When the Western diet was introduced, they began to get the standard chronic illnesses. But before that, they ate mostly sweet potatoes, a diet that was mostly sweet potatoes. And they had no chronic illnesses, no diabetes, no cancer, really, really, really low numbers. When I say no, I mean significantly low. So look into the blue zones. Look into a whole food plant-based diet with no SOS. Look into the number one killer and the cause. And I want to talk a second about diabetes, because most people with a family member with diabetes are believing super, super outdated science, which is that sugar causes diabetes. And this misunderstanding has to do with taking the symptom for the cause. So the symptom is hyperglycemia, blood sugar that is high. In other words, glucose that's in the blood that is not making it into the cells. And I remind you that our number one source of fuel for the human body and for the brain is glucose, sugar. Not all sugars are the same. Different molecules, like fruit has fructose. Glucose is our number one form of fuel for the body and the brain. So when you eat a sweet potato, it burns so fast that you, in the middle of digesting it, you've already burned 40% of those carbohydrates. In other words, it doesn't store them as fat. The body will never take a ring of carbohydrate and turn it into a long-chain fatty acid. It's impossible. It's way too expensive. Instead, it will take a fat and store that as fat. That makes a lot more sense. Why would it do that? Why would it take a carb and turn it into fat? It wouldn't. Now, before we talk about carbs, we have to talk about the two different types of carbs. You have on one side white refined processed carbs, and on the other side you have whole plant complex carbohydrates. Every time we eat a whole plant carbohydrate, that is immediately available to the cells as energy. Like I said, you're burning 40% of that sweet potato as you're eating it, just by digesting it. If you ate like a billion sweet potatoes, guess what? You get full that night, put your leg out of the covers, and you'll burn it off as heat while you're sleeping. It'll never store it. It'll take a lot of work for you to store that as fat. However, this is where it gets convoluted. Most of the things that you call carbs are not carbs. That pizza that you're calling a carb, most of the nutrients that you're getting, I feel bad calling it nutrients. Most of what you're getting in that pizza is the dairy, which is the saturated fat. So pizza, unless it's the kind of pizza that I make, which is 100% vegan pizza, then your pizza is not a carb, it's a fat. And again, most of the food that we eat, all of the food that we eat has the three main macronutrients: fat, carbs, and protein, in varying degrees. The problem is the things you call carbs are actually fats, meaning they have mostly saturated fat, not the healthy fat. Unless you have nuts, seeds, and avocado on your pizza, most likely you have dairy products. Not only are they full of, like I said, legal amounts of of pus, feces, and blood, but they're full of the number one source of saturated fat. And when you eat that, you're contributing. And again, when I talk about risk factors, when you look up and there's only 12 to 15 risk factors with regard to cardiovascular disease. When you look up all of them, there's only one of them on the list that actually contributes to plaque, that actually makes the blood thicker. If you're smoking cigarettes, guess what? That doesn't add plaque in your arteries. That's a risk factor. But one of the risk factors, when you look up the risk factors, is causally linked and actually produces plaque in the arteries. And that is the diet. A diet that's full of dietary cholesterol, which takes the form of myocellular lipids, fat in the blood. Every time you eat a fatty meal, whether it's chicken, eggs, olive oil, any type of oil, you're making your blood thicker. And that fat in the blood, and I'm going to tie this into diabetes now. What happens is you eat a pizza, and that pizza has carbs in it, right? Which are immediately available to the cells as energy, but it has mostly fat. And the body says, I want to burn those carbs, and I'm going to store the fat. But what happens is, the more fat you eat, the more fat that gets into the blood. And the more fat that gets into the blood, the more fat that tries to get into the cells. And this is the cause of type 2 diabetes. Fat in the blood intramyocellular lipids actually end up blocking the signaling of the insulin receptors. So the insulin is the key that opens the door to the cell to let the glucose in. And when you eat a bunch of carbs, the blood gets full of glucose, sugar, and the cells say, welcome, you're my number one source of fuel. I want to consume you. And it's supposed to let it in. And the insulin is what unlocks the door to the cell and says, let the glucose in. Well, guess what? That insulin signaling that says open the door to the cell so that so the glucose, the sugar, is available to the cell and the brain, by the way. When that's blocked by the intramyocellular lipids, I'm talking about fat that gets lodged into the cell, particles of fat that gets into the cell and blocks the insulin receptors. This is the cause of type 2 diabetes, not sugar, not carbs. The problem is not the carb. The problem is that you can't eat the carb, which is optimal. Get it? So just because the carb causes you to have high blood sugar doesn't mean that the carb is not optimal, you see. And I'm talking about whole plant carbs, not shitty, white, refined garbage carbs, okay? Hardly anybody's going to dispute that sugar is bad for you. I'm talking about white, refined sugar. Most everybody's going to agree that that's bad for you. This video is brought to you by Hoplark Sparkling Hop Tea, the hoppy one. So, and also blue Sharpies. Whenever you need a permanent marker, go for the dual tip fine/ultra fine blue Sharpie. Okay. So, type 2 diabetes is a foodborne illness. And when you look it up, you're going to see super old science right at the top of the fucking Google feed that says that it's caused by sugar and carbs. This is intentional. There are all kinds of creepy ass fad diets, such as the ketogenic movement, which, by the way, guarantees that you will die of an early death. If you were on keto, you're going to die of an early death. All of the studies show this. When you look at why the ketogenic diet was made, and you find out it was only made for children with epilepsy that was not controlled by medications, and you find out even within those kids, they knew that it was a trade-off, that they couldn't stay on long term, and if they did, they were going to die early. And they were sacrificing their cardiovascular health so they could have some kind of life, so they're not having seizures all day, every day. That's literally where the ketogenic diet comes from. You can look that up right now and you'll find out that what I'm telling you is not made up. And the ketogenic diet has never, ever been proven safe. It's the opposite. It's been proven to give you an early death. And when you're on keto to lose weight, guess what? You'll lose weight fast. And you'll get that quick fix of, oh my God, I just lost a bunch of weight. And if you stay on keto, off and on, like everybody else is doing for years, you're going to sacrifice your cardiovascular health and you're going to have an early death. All of the literature points to that fact. If you want to lose weight and keep it off, do it the right way. Don't try to lose it overnight or in a week or in 2 weeks, but get on the optimal diet for the human machine. Whole food, plant-based, that means that you're sourcing all of your nutrients from whole plants. No more salt, oil, or sugar, because there's no such thing as a healthy oil. There's no such thing as a healthy salt and organic minerals. Every time you eat any kind of oil, it immediately makes your blood thick, contributing to the number one killer, heart disease, as well as type 2 diabetes, which is an epidemic. More people die of these 3 common illnesses than the current health crisis that shall not be named. If you really give a shit about human health and saving lives, then expose the keto fraud, expose these conglomerates, these massive companies and these massive industries that are flooding our search engines with disinformation, keeping our friends and our family and our loved ones and our children from accessing the highest quality information that's available to us, which is a whole food plant-based diet with no SOS. That's the only diet that's not only been proven to prevent these 3 chronic illnesses, but it's been shown to reverse them. So this is part 2. I've already talked about how adopting a whole food plant-based diet actually prevents all 3 of the top chronic illnesses in the West and reverses not only type 2 diabetes, but coronary artery disease. I'm talking about the #1 way to die, which is caused by a diet full of dietary cholesterol and saturated fat, which comes directly from animal products. The narrowing of the arteries, the blood gets thicker, the arteries become harder and narrower until finally they're so narrow that no blood can flow, and you have that first myocardial infarction, which is, by the way, normative. It is normal to have a heart attack when you're 50, 60 years old. That is normal now. Used to not be, and it's never been normal in the blue zones, which are the healthiest people in the entire planet. But in our world, that's normal to have a heart attack when you're 50, 60, 70 years old. The most popular way to go out, and we know the cause. If you know the cause, you can opt out of the status quo and live long enough to meet your great-great-great-grandchildren. So, this video, part 2, is going to be about our immune system. Okay? We live in a world that is dominated by bullshit. Namely, the idea that that germs make us sick. This is called germ theory. This has dominated our mainstream medical industry for the last 100 years, perhaps even longer. And this idea goes in direct opposition to reality, which is called terrain theory. Terrain theory is the idea that it's not the germs, in other words, it's not the contact with the microbes that make you sick, but it's the terrain that allows those microbes to multiply, that allows the bad bugs to overwhelm the good bugs, that allows those viruses, which are not alive and which are not airborne, by the way, those of you who have masks on, it's not going to fly through the air 6 feet and get on me, because viruses are not airborne. Viruses are junk in the cell, full of RNA and proteins, and the only way that they can make you sick is if you have a sick body, if you're already immune compromised, okay? And not only do you have a microbiome, in other words, the goal of immune health is biodiversity, meaning you have lots and lots and lots of bugs, good and bad and everything in between, and the more biodiverse your microbiota is, the better chance you are at staying healthy and avoiding getting sick. Getting sick not being defined by a symptom, because a symptom is an immune response. It means you have an immune system. If it responds and creates a symptom, which is a messenger, you don't go to your doctor and ask him to shoot the messenger. You pay attention to your body. And you build up your immune system. So not only do we have a microbiome, but we have something called the human virome. In other words, you have thousands and thousands of viruses within the human body already. And if you've ever had a flu shot, guess what? You have multiple COVIDs in your body. Okay, not COVIDs, but coronaviruses. The idea that COVID is caused by coronaviruses, when you start to study this, you find out if you got a flu shot, you're going to test positive for the corona, the COVID-19 test. Why? Because it was already in the injection, and we all have coronaviruses because those coronaviruses are in the animal cell lines in which those pharmaceutical products have been produced. But that's not even as important as what I want to talk about, which is the immune health. So we all have a human virome, and those viruses in your body do not make you sick unless they overwhelm the immune system and they're allowed to infiltrate the cells, and using the cells' life, because viruses aren't alive, they have to use the life of the cell to multiply. And when that happens, your immune system has been compromised. If you don't have a compromised immune system, no virus will ever be allowed to multiply and overwhelm your immune system. Your immune system will recognize it, will attack it, and it'll go away. So you'll never get sick with any virus unless you have an immune system that's compromised. How do we build up the immune system? By building up the microbiome. I'm talking about the gut flora, okay? The gut microbiome has all kinds of bugs, and when you eat something or drink something called a probiotic, you're putting bugs in your gut, okay? These are desirable, beneficial bacteria. You want them to grow and multiply. Well, guess what? I don't care how many kombuchas you had today. if you're drinking probiotics and you're not feeding them, those bugs, what they eat, then they're going to starve. Bugs eat something called prebiotic. The only existing prebiotic is fiber. Fiber means plants. Probiotics, bugs, eat prebiotics, fiber. Bugs eat fiber. What kind of fiber? Soluble and insoluble fibers. Every time you're eating plants, you digest the fiber, and then some of the fiber is not digestible, but you don't just poop it out. It's not a waste. That insoluble fiber is used. It makes it past the first part of the digestive tract, and it goes to the next part, our large intestine. And this is where something is created called short-chain fatty acids. And this is the foundation of our immune system. You want to have a strong immune system? Feed it insoluble fiber, allow it to grow and multiply. And when these good bacteria are fed insoluble fiber, they're allowed to multiply, and we get something called biodiversity of the microbiota. And guess what? Then when the immune system recognizes some undesirable microbe or some junk called a virus, guess what? It recognizes it, you have an immune response, and that sucker is not allowed to thrive or multiply. You'll never have to worry about getting sick. Getting sick has always been optional, as long as you know how to take care of the immune system. You can trust your body, you can trust the immune system, as long as you give it the right fuel, okay? If you get away from the standard American diet, which is full of toxic junk and animal products, which are full of dietary cholesterol and saturated fat, if you feed it the fuel that it needs, which is whole plant carbohydrates, which give the body glucose, which is our primary fuel, when you give it that, full of carbohydrates, which are full of fiber. Fiber means plants. There are 0% fiber in the animal kingdom, just like there is 0 dietary cholesterol in the plant kingdom. The only saturated fat that's in the plant kingdom that you're going to get is going to be in the oils. And there's a little bit of saturated fat in some of these, like avocado, but it's such a small amount when compared to these animal sources of fat. So those of you who are on keto, friends don't let friends go keto. And friends don't let friends watch mainstream news, because the mainstream news will never tell you to take care of your immune system. The mainstream news is going to tell you to be afraid, be very afraid, be very afraid, be very afraid of the next big thing. But guess what? You don't have to be afraid, my friends, because you can take care of your immune system and you don't have to worry about ever getting sick. You can, if you're comfortable, you can take that mask off, you can take a big deep breath, and you can give your friends and family a big hug and say, I'm not afraid because my immune system is strong. My microbiota is biodiverse, and I don't have to be afraid of the bad bugs overwhelming the good bugs. I don't have to be afraid of the viruses multiplying because my immune system is strong, because I feed it loads and loads of fiber. And I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't talk about fermented foods, which is the best source of feeding our microbiome. But you don't have to be afraid. As long as you know how to take care of your body, you can trust your body. So my friends, remember that we are light beings. And when you feed the body light, you're full of light. Light is chlorophyll. We're sun eaters. When we can't eat the sun directly, we have to eat the sun in the form of plants. Okay? When you consume death and suffering in the form of chopping up animal parts and trying to eat them, this is like those animals ate the plants that ate the sun, and I'm trying to get the sunlight that, you know what I mean? That's how many levels of separation am I from the sun when I eat an animal product. This is part 3 of immunity through nutrition. I want to talk about eggs, and I want to circle back around to what I began with, our fundamental right to access the highest quality information, as well as the agendas and the disinformation campaigns that exist and that have been launched against we the people who deserve that access to the highest quality information. Thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, we can read emails from the Egg Board, which is a part of our federal government, and the egg industry, these corporations that produce the eggs. And you can learn a lot from reading these emails, because these egg corporations attempted to advertise eggs in misleading ways, and the USDA, the head of advertising for the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, has had to correct them again and again and again and again. And thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, we can actually read these emails. So I saw that they tried to call eggs healthy. They tried to use the word nutritious. They tried to say part of a balanced diet. And I'll get to the most shocking part in a moment. But every time they use these words and these phrases, the USDA would step in and say, hey, you can't say healthy. You can't say nutritious. You can't even say a part of a balanced diet. And the reason is because the egg board is funded with money from the federal government. They're not allowed to lie. And because they're not allowed to lie, and because the USDA has specific definitions for these words, something, for example, for something to be called nutritious, it actually has to be nutritious. What a concept, right? It has to be healthy if it's going to be called healthy. And those parameters are very specific. I think it's less than 90 grams of cholesterol, and even half an egg doesn't meet that. And so because eggs are so high in dietary cholesterol and saturated fat, they're not allowed to be called, it's illegal for them to be called healthy, safe, nutritious. Damn it, I spoiled it. The most shocking one is when, after all of that, they tried to have this, it was an ad about children snacking, and they said you can't use the word safe because of, and this has to do with the risk that's inevitable with salmonella poisoning when you consume eggs. And another part that the Egg Corporation argued about was that they were saying the USDA dictates how they can describe the preparation for eggs, and the only option that they give them is dry and hard. Egg yolks must be firm, and the egg industries come back and said, hey, we say, you know, and then they tried to reference some bullshit article, and they were corrected and said, no, that was a misquote. The only option is a firm egg yolk. And even then, you're not allowed to call eggs safe. And if you are digging deep and being clever in this current pandemic of 2020, and you're trying to mitigate this health crisis and think, you know what? If something comes down the pipe and I'm not allowed to go to the grocery store unless I take some vaccination, maybe I want to grow my own food. Great idea, right? And maybe I want to raise my own chickens in my backyard. Great idea, right? So we've been told most of our lives that it's healthy, safe, and normal to not only eat the chicken periods, because, by the way, eggs are chicken periods. If you dig deep enough, you'll find out chickens really do have a menstrual cycle, and it produces an egg yolk, which produces the egg white. And it's really gross when you think about it. But it's not just gross, because if it were only gross, then maybe I wouldn't be talking about this today. But it's unbelievably cruel. But even if it was unbelievably cruel, maybe I still wouldn't be talking about it. But because there is an agenda to keep us in the dark, and because the egg industry funds bullshit studies every year, trying to tell us that they're healthy, and trying to weasel their way out of being honest with us, who want to feed our families healthy options and want to at least know the truth so that we can make the choice for ourselves, right? Because of that. Oh, and by the way, the USDA did suggest, made some suggestions for these egg corporations when they said they couldn't use these words. One of them was a recognizable ingredient. Another one was satisfying. They're allowed to say satisfying. Oh, and they're also allowed to say nutrient dense. Why? Because there's no legal definition for the term nutrient dense. Mountain Dews and Snickers can be called nutrient dense, and that's okay. So this is an incredibly disturbing rabbit hole for those of you who choose to go and fact check this. It's so shocking, and so many good people are not only growing their own food, but considering raising chickens. And I want you to know that not only is it really gross, but it is wicked unhealthy. Eggs are so full of saturated fat and dietary cholesterol that it is not even considered safe to consume. And the risk is so high for salmonella poisoning as well as bird flu, full of all kinds of really gross microbes and viruses, that they're not considered a safe option for human consumption. So we as enlightened humanity, we should reject eating the periods of chickens. Call them what they are. Don't use euphemisms. Because this is programming. You have to opt out of the programming. Stop saying meat. Say the rotting, chopped up body parts of sentient beings. Stop saying eggs and call it chicken periods. And seek the truth no matter where it takes you. And if you find yourself uncomfortable and you find yourself like I did in the beginning, living as a man who's out of alignment with his own values, then start to take baby steps in the right direction and start making better choices for yourself. And those baby steps will add up over time, and every year you will look back and you will say, look how far I have come. It's uncomfortable looking into these things, I admit it, but we deserve to know the truth, because that's really what it comes down to for me, is that we all have the fundamental right to access the highest quality information that's available to us in the present moment. And these corporations are intentionally misleading us and our families and our friends. Eggs are not healthy, meat is not healthy, and dairy is not healthy. And these organizations, these industries, do not want us to know this. You know, we are all at different places in this journey, but when you ask somebody who's against a whole food plant-based diet and anti-vegan, when you ask them this question, what is the one nutrient that you can't get from plants that you can only get from animals? When you ask them that question, they can never come up with an answer. And the reason for that is because the answer doesn't exist. They might try to say B12 or something like that. And we know that the safest way to consume B12 is with a supplement. And we know that the latest research shows that vegans don't have any less B12 levels than non-vegans. And we know that all of the feed that's given to animals is pumped full of B12 and other nutrients because those foods are so low in nutrients. So that's what it comes down to, is knowing your shit. And I have researched this for years, and I've come up against every single argument against a whole food plant-based diet, and they all fall flat because the science is on our side. The truth is on our side. The facts are on our side. There's one optimal diet for the human machine, and it is a whole food plant-based diet with no salt, sugar, or oil. Everything else comes second or third or fourth. If you have a friend or family who's on a ketogenic diet or any low carb bullshit fad diet, speak the truth in love. Help them to avoid having an early death. And I hope that as we seek the truth together, the highest quality information will become more available, and that we will fight against these campaigns of the egg, meat, and dairy industries against we the people who just want to know what the best options are for our friends and families. Thanks for watching. If you got this far, grace and peace.